Hello, everybody, and welcome to Johnny Skywatcher Podcast. I'm your host, Johnny Skywatcher, and this is the podcast where I like to talk about movie news, TV, gaming, Nintendo, and anything else that I find interesting on the internet. So today I actually have three topics lined up to talk about. So I'm going to be talking about the weekend box office first. At least I think so. Let me check my slides. Yeah, first I'll be talking about the weekend box office and how that turned out. And then I'll be talking just probably very shortly about the new look we've gotten of the Shazam sequel, Shazam Fury of the Gods. We've gotten a new picture of of the main cast in their transform versions. What do you call them? Shazam forms? I don't know. And then lastly, I'll be talking about my thoughts on Luca, which came out on Disney Plus this last Friday in the US. And sadly, not in a movie theater in the US. Yeah, I was not happy about that. And okay, so with that, let's get to the box office. So I can decide how I want to show this. So we only had one wide release this last weekend, which was the Hitman's Wife's Bodyguard, a sequel. Whoa, something changed on my screen. I don't know why that happened. The Hitman's Wife's Bodyguard, and which okay, I got totally distracted by something happening on my screen. Oh, and I forgot to send a test in the chat. Make sure chat is working. I have an automated message that's supposed to play like when one person chats something, but sometimes it doesn't seem to work. And then usually I don't have anybody watching, so a lot of times it's just nothing happening in chat. Anyway, as I was saying, Hitman's Wife's Bodyguard, sequel to the Hitman's Bodyguard with Ryan Reynolds and Samuel L. Jackson. I didn't see the first one, so I don't even know anything about the second one, but it was number one in the box office this weekend. Something not liking me. And I made $11.4 million. And what I'm going to start doing... Why isn't it making that noise? Oh, I think I know why. Because I'm selected on more things than I need to be. What I'm going to start doing with the box office numbers is rounding to the 100,000th place. No real reason other than I don't have a high confidence in the numbers. This is coming from the numbers shortly before thenumbers.com this is coming from thenumbers.com shortly before I started the podcast, so I don't know how reliable they are. They usually, at this time of day, are more reliable than what is on Box Office Mojo, because I think by this time they usually have updated numbers, but that's not always the case. And I don't know, I think it's just weird to put it to like the have the high enough confidence to put it in the single or even the tens digits. So I went to 100,000s. So 11.4 million. And I think that's how I'll do it from now on. I'll just always round to the 100,000s. Because I think that's, you can be fairly confident that it's somewhere in that range. And then in second place, we had still making that sound. I don't know if that's, if you can hear it. I hear it. I think I have my desktop audio off, so it shouldn't be playing over, but I don't know. Second place was A Quiet Place Part 2, which is in its fourth weekend now. Made $9.1 million, so Quiet Place Part 2 is doing pretty well. And at number 3, we had Peter Rabbit 2, The Runaway, at $6.1 million in its second weekend, which it looks like it's might have okay legs. You know, we'll have to see how well it does with some of the other things coming out And then we have in fourth, in its third weekend, The Conjuring 3, which made $5 million. And rounding out the top 5, at number 5, we have Cruella, which made $4.8 million. So, I don't want to sound too much like Grace Randolph saying so. I'm just looking at the numbers, trying to think if I have anything to say about that. Let me just go to. The one thing that people were talking about, especially last week, there's something missing from this, which I don't know if you noticed or not, but there was no In the Heights. In the Heights came out last week. It was not number 1 at the box office, and it was not in the top 5 in this week either. And let me just bring up the numbers. Let me just 1 second. I'm gonna bring up the numbers. Okay, this is the full chart for the numbers. So we have those movies. In the Heights was number 6, and it only made $4.2 million. So, I'm saying so like Grace Randolph. So what does that mean? It does, like I said before, a lot of people were saying from the get-go from last weekend that In the Heights did not do very well. Some people were even saying In the Heights had flopped. You know, it was a box office bomb. I felt that was a little bit of exaggeration. It did make over 10 million in its first weekend. If you just click on it to see more details. If you look at its weekend box office performance, it made $11.5 million in its first weekend, which if you take into an account, we're still in unprecedented times. The box office hasn't totally recovered yet. You know, we are starting to see movies opening higher, like A Quiet Place Part 2 opened, I think it's 40 million something. But, you know, we haven't seen a movie open over 50 million or even 100 million, which if this were 2019, that would be, I'm not going to say the norm. It's not like every movie opens over 100 million, but for these big tentpole movies, yes, you would want them to open with over 100 million. But keep in mind, In the Heights is not one of those big tentpole movies. If this opened in 2019, I don't think it would be making that much money either. But what's more telling in this weekend is the fact that it made only 4.2 million and had a 63% drop. So that's not a great sign, especially because, as I said, it might have good legs. It doesn't look like it has great legs at all, you know. I don't think that's going to change in the further weeks. If you look at a musical that did have great legs, in fact, let's just look at that. Let's go look up The Greatest Showman on the numbers, because that had great legs for a movie, but it did open relatively small. And if I can find information I want. Okay, so this, in comparison, this is The Greatest Showman, which was opened in 2017, in the winter, December 22nd. And as you can see, its first weekend only made $8.8 million. But then look at its second weekend, its third weekend, its fourth weekend, its fifth weekend, all higher than its first weekend. And then look how long it kept going. 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13 weeks making over $1 million. That's pretty impressive. And then you have In the Heights, which, granted, keep in mind we only have 2 weeks to look at right now, but you have it only made 11 million, and then it went down by over about half, 4.2 million, and there's a lot of competition left in the summer. So I wouldn't necessarily go as far as calling it a box office bomb at this point, but yeah, it doesn't look like they are going to make their money back at all. And it's definitely not a success at this point. And if it drops even faster, then I would say you could probably call it a flop. Especially keep in mind this is also available on HBO Max. So you can take somewhat into account those numbers, but not even as like added percentage of like box office revenue. It's not comparable to, I would say, to like the Disney's Premier Access. Number one, we don't know what the numbers are. And number two, HBO Max doesn't get additional revenue from that. It's just it's just part of the HBO Max revenue. So how do you even factor that into your, when you determine how much this movie made, how do you factor that in? I don't even know how they do the math on that. So it does not look like In the Heights did that well. Let's just go back and see. I want to look at Peter Rabbit 2. This was another one that I said might have a longer run on it. It's doing better than the what's that? In the Heights. So In the Heights has a total of 19.6 million. Peter Rabbit's at 20, so they're pretty comparable for their total domestic box office. But when you compare their international is even more telling. Because if you look at In the Heights has almost nothing internationally. 2.1 million. Then look at Peter Rabbit 2. So it has a comparable domestic box office of 20 million. But it has international box office of 70.5 million. And I think it might have come out early in certain markets abroad. But that's way more than In the Heights has made. And I think, it's not unexpected for In the Heights to have a lower international box office because I would think it would have a more of a limited appeal. Whereas Peter Rabbit 2, it's an animated kids film, at least has that appeal to audiences abroad. It's a family film. Whereas In the Heights is much more specific to the American experience in a lot of ways. I can't really say too much about it because I haven't even seen the film. But let's just go over some of the reasons why In the Heights did not succeed. So obviously I'm not an expert on it, but I'll be talking about from what I've seen people saying, what makes sense to me, and from what I think the situation is. In the Heights, for one thing, it's a adaptation of a stage musical. Those are kind of hit or miss. You have certain examples of them doing pretty well at the box office, and then you have Cats. So So you have, some successes. I'm trying to. Did Les Mis do well? What was a big one? A lot of these stage adaptation musicals have not been that well received, even if they did make money. The Greatest Showman, not one of those. It is not an adaptation of a stage musical. It's an original movie musical. I mean, it's done in such a way that it almost makes you feel like it is an adaptation of a stage musical, but it isn't. In the Heights is. Not that I think a lot of people who are going to see In the Heights really care about the fact that it was based on a stage musical, but you got to keep that in mind. So when you come down to like the core fan base for this are probably people who've seen and love the stage musical that want to see the movie version of that, which is going to be a smaller amount of people because I had heard of In the Heights, but just heard of it. Like it was a thing I was aware existed, but I don't think I'd even heard any of the music for it before seeing the trailers for this movie. So as I was saying, you have the fact that it's a adaptation of a stage musical, which don't necessarily do very well. You had, I think, people overestimating how much it would make based on the fact that Lin-Manuel Miranda was attached to it. Yes, he was in the movie, I think, in part. He wrote the original stage musical, I think, and he was in that. That's kind of was his beginning career thing before he really got into the movies, and obviously before he did Hamilton. And I think that caused some people to, especially when they were looked at, oh, it's the guy who did Hamilton, so obviously this will be as big as that. No, In the Heights is not Hamilton. I'm not really a fan of either one, but it's not Hamilton. So I think a lot of people were just assuming because of that it would do well. I think if you look at its performance worldwide, and then I think maybe it would be neat if there was a breakdown from across the country. I don't have that, but I'm just going to guess from its performance worldwide that has a limited audience. Like, if you're not a fan of the musical, if you know nothing about the stage musical, and that's not the reason getting you into the movie. I think it has a limited audience, not just worldwide, but in the US itself, in the fact that this is a movie about a very specific neighborhood in New York City. And I think in the trailers they tried to get across, I don't even know, I don't remember the trailers that much. There was just, they didn't tell anything about the story, and I still don't know anything about what the actual story is. Like, yes, I know it's about the neighborhood, they sing and dance, and it's about all their dreams of what they want to do with their lives or something like that. That's not interesting to me. That's not a story, and that's not a trailer that really sells it and makes it a huge summer event. I think that yeah, it does have a limited appeal because it's a musical for one thing. There are people who, just from the fact it's a musical, will not go and see it. They go. A lot of people will see musicals despite the fact that it's a musical, not because it's a musical. And then you have the fact that it's being sold basically just from the fact that it's a musical. And then you have the fact that the material it's about a specific neighborhood in New York City. There's a lot of people in the US that don't care. That's not the story that appeals to them. That's not the story that, is going to make them want to go out into the movie theaters and watch it. And then there's the fact that it's on HBO Max. And then there's, like who was this movie really for? Other than the fans of In the Heights. Of course, In the Heights fans are going to go see this. And then you're going to have people who are just fans in musicals in general are going to go see it. But I think everybody else not really going to go see this. And I think that showed with the numbers. And I think it's very likely in the coming weeks, we're going to see more of that. Moving on, is there anything else that I want to talk about? Is there anyone in chat who has any thoughts? That's okay if you don't. Okay, so talked about, let's just take a quick look at what Quiet Place has done so far, because they are doing pretty well. So A Quiet Place Part 2 is at 124.9 million domestically for a total of 221.6 million. And I don't want daily, weekend box office. So yes, they did 47.5 million, and then 19, 12, and 9 million. So that they're doing pretty well. And actually, I do want to let's do a quick comparison, because I like to do that. Let's take a look at A Quiet Place versus A Quiet Place Part 2 and see how it's doing. Okay, so as you can see here, so far, A Quiet Place Part 2 was actually pretty close to the same numbers until you get to the last weekend and the last couple weekends, I guess. But this isn't entirely unexpected. You know, we are dealing with a different box office. It's just surprising looking at how close they were in the first several weekends. So look at opening weekend, and then you really start seeing the difference in the second weekend. But then the third weekend is a little bit closer. And then they're getting closer in terms of where they were, but it's still obviously A Quiet Place is going to have made more in a non-pandemic setting. But in general, they're still doing pretty well. I think it's pretty impressive what A Quiet Place Part 2 has done, but I think it leads people to forget that we're still in a different situation. Yes, it made 40 million. That doesn't mean every new movie that comes out is going to make 40 million. And even then, that's 40 million doesn't mean the box office has completely recovered yet. 40 million means, you know, things are doing better, but it's not making over 50 million. It's not making over even close to 100 million or over 100 million. And so the next big sign of box office recovery, I would say next week, but I have a feeling that Fast 9 might actually bomb at the box office, which is, it's been out internationally for weeks. You know, it'll be almost a month, I think, when it comes out this Friday. And it hasn't done as well as the last one did. And I think there's a good chance it'll follow the same path that Transformers did. That Transformers went up and up in the US, and then it peaked and it started going down. And the movie after Transformers, when it peaked and went down in the US, that next movie that went down internationally, that's when it hit its peak and made a ton of money. And then it went down. And then, you know, you have basically two movies from then, you know, it's just both down. So I think might see a similar thing. I don't think Fast 9, based on people's feedback and based on the international reception of it, is going to do as well. It'll probably be half of what the last one was, at least, if not lower. It could be even lower based on the fact that it's been out so long internationally that it's had a long enough time for this bad word of mouth to build up. But we'll see. We'll have to see if that carries over to the US. What I think might actually be the big sign of how well the box office is recovering, it could be Black Widow that comes out July 9th. Could we see a movie make over 100 million in its first weekend, or I think that might be a little unrealistic. So it'll be interesting to see what people's expectations for Black Widow are. I don't know if I'll even bother looking it up. Maybe I'll just talk about it after it comes out. But I really hope people aren't thinking it's going to make over 100 million, because I think there's a good chance it won't. It's available on Disney Plus, and things are still recovering. And the fact that we've already seen what happens to Black Widow. It's a weird sort of prequel movie for the MCU. And it has these things going against it, so I don't think it's going to be the first post-pandemic 100 million at the box office in the US. But that's just what I think. What do I know? I don't know what I'm talking about. I'm not an expert. You know, to anybody out there watching this, I am no expert, so don't rely on what I say. I could totally be wrong. Okay, moving on to the next topic, since I did not expect I would be able to talk about the box office for that long, but somehow I did it. I'll just... the director of Shazam 2, Shazam Fury of the Gods, David F. Sandberg, came out with a photo of the Shazam cast. Let me just go to, as you can see, it shows the Shazam family in their superhero costumes. He said in his Twitter tweet, don't know how long we can keep the new suits from leaking, so here's a pic I took the other day. And before I talk about some other things, I'll just say I really like the new look. Honestly, I'm not a superhero suit kind of guy. I feel like they make these like minor changes a lot of times between the movies with the superhero costumes, and sometimes I'm like, wait, they changed something? Like, unless I see a comparison side by side, I'm like, oh, I thought it was just like the same basic thing. And for the most part, this looks like the same basic thing, except I did see in a picture comparison that this guy, I can't see my mouse, the guy on the right, the Hispanic guy, his costume was green in the first Shazam, and now it's going to be black. But the one thing I did want to talk about is these. It's interesting that they posted this when we've also gotten leaked photos of so many other DC projects right now. I'm not going to show them on screen. You can look them up if you want to, but we've gotten leaked pictures of Supergirl from the Flash set, which has some people upset because it doesn't look the way they want it to look, which is a little ridiculous because you're looking at a set photo. You know, obviously it's not going to look the way it looks on film. And on top of that is the fact that it's the actress in a harness, you know, doing these flying scenes. So, of course it's not going to look that way. And then on top of that, with the Supergirl picture, you have the fact that, you know, she doesn't have her cape, but that's probably because they're going to CGI it in. On top of the fact that, like I said, she's in a harness. So probably not the best situation to have a cape flying around. You know, safety reasons, I would assume. Also, you just don't know how they're filming it to begin with. For all you know, they filmed that and then they do another take with the cape. I don't know. It just seems dumb to me to like overreact to set pictures like that. And then we've also seen set pictures of the Flash, Barry Allen, and Michael Keaton's Bruce Wayne. I feel like my brain melted. I was thinking Bruce Wayne in the movie. Not really anything to say about that. But I would say, yeah, I kind of more support them posting pictures like these, and it kind of makes sense to just do it rather than when you know it's going to leak, just post like a picture that's like the way you want it to look, rather than relying on the internet not looking at these set pictures. I think the director, The Flash, came out on Twitter and was asking people to just not look at them. But come on, what do you expect? You should just release a picture that looks better. At least release it afterwards if you didn't know that it was going to, if you didn't do it beforehand. But even then, if it's taking place outside, they're going to be set photos because people can far away see what you're doing on set and take pictures. And there's always going to be somebody interested in what you're doing because you're filming stuff outside. So of course there's going to be people taking pictures. And I just think it's, you know, like I saw someone, I can't remember, say just post a picture before, because you know it's going to leak when you do an outside shoot like that. Okay, moving on to my last topic of the day. And I'm going to be, if I can, let's talk about Luca. So Luca came out this last week on Friday in the US on Disney Plus. And despite calling it a Disney Plus original, this was the newest Pixar movie. And I think I've expressed before how I think it's dumb that they did this strategy. They did the same thing with Soul back during Christmas, this last Christmas, which I think made more sense given that current climate. But to do the same thing with Luca, where the movie theaters in the US are open. You know, we have big movies. We have Fast 9 coming out this next Friday. So it just does not make sense to me to do this to Luca, and it devalues Pixar a little bit to just keep releasing their stuff on Disney Plus to no additional cost, when they put other movies like Raya and the Last Dragon and Cruella in movie theaters and then premiere access on Disney Plus. Like I've said, I don't even need to say more than that because I've talked about it on length and previous episodes. Yeah, it just doesn't make sense to me. That being said, I quite like this movie. Let me just adjust this. I really liked Luca. It's a charming little film. I feel like it didn't get, I don't know what, I haven't read too many reviews or looked it up, but I feel like it isn't as popular as it should be. So I don't know if it had come out in theaters, if it would be as successful as Disney wants it to be. I feel like it could go either way. It's just like with the In the Heights. Like, who knows? There's these sort of variables that, like, I could see why it would maybe perform poorly at the box office, but there are certain elements that I feel like maybe it would do well. Maybe it would have long, legs. Maybe, people would have good word of mouth of it. So, you're always guessing. But when it comes to my viewing of the film, I really liked it, and I kind of wished I got a chance to see it in movie theaters like I talked about, because it looks beautiful. The animation, it's Pixar. Pixar, always does a great job, especially the water effects. Every times, the scenery, the Italian scenery, the water effects, everything is top notch, like you would expect with Pixar. As for the design of the characters, I know some people have complained about not liking the sort of one second. Not this. Okay. Some people have complained about the style that they've been going with what was the previous, with this and the next movie, I think. The mouth design, I don't know. I like it. They look cute. The characters, and let me see. Overall, I would say I agree with most people in saying that this isn't really the top tier of Pixar films, but I think it's just a genuinely good movie. I've only watched it the one time so far, and I don't know, it's a movie that has a really great feel to it, and I don't know, like the setting and the story is still genuinely good. I think I've heard people talk about how, well, it's not as epic, or the story is just so small compared to other movies, the other like Pixar movies. But I mean, if you think about it, look at Toy Story. The story of Toy Story isn't really epic. It's about these toys trying to get back to their owner. I don't know that I would call that like epic storytelling. So I somewhat disagree with that notion that Pixar tells these epic stories. And I think a lot of times you can boil down most stories to something simple. And in this case, I would say, the main thrust of the story is these two boys, and let me see if I can remember their names. Well, Luca, obviously, Luca, and I'm gonna have to look it up. I'm gonna have to look it up because I just cannot think of it at all. I always like forget, like the moment I start talking about something, I'm like, what was that? Alberto. Okay. So the main thrust of the story is Luca and Alberto become friends. They're both sea monsters, and Luca lives with his parents, and Alberto, you later find out, is basically just living by himself, and they form this friendship, and Alberto, shows Luca a lot of things. He introduces him to the Vespa, as they see in catalogs, and then when Luca's parents discovered that he's been spending his time on land, they decide they want to send him down into the deep with his uncle to live. And he doesn't want to do that. So he and Alberto run away to the human town, and they start trying to find a way to get a Vespa so they can sort of run away together. And then the main plot of the film after that becomes entering this race so they can get the money to get the Vespa, which I think is probably where people's criticisms come from, that it seems a little small in a way, that this is all about just getting a Vespa. But I think it's more than that. I think, okay, now we get into the part where we talk about Luca and subtext, let's say. So there were a lot of people talking about this movie when the trailer first came out, comparing it to another movie, Call Me By Your Name. Now, I've never seen Call Me By Your Name, but I know what it's about. If you don't know what it's about, it's about a gay relationship, and a lot of people are comparing it to that because the way that the two boy characters are very close together. Now, the creators of this film have, basically come out and said that's not the intention at all. Anything you see there, subtext you see is not intended. And I'm not totally convinced that's true. Now, for one thing, I do subscribe to the idea of death of the author when it comes to certain things. Even if they didn't intend for subtext to be there, you can still read subtext. You can, whatever the author's intentions are, you could still read into something that they didn't intend you to be there. So when it comes to this movie, I feel like there is so much, and it isn't a one-to-one allegory. For one thing, okay, we'll just start there. It isn't a one-to-one allegory because you can't just, if you try to look at this film and say sea monster equals gay, it doesn't equal that. It doesn't work in all the scenes because, you know, okay, you have the two boys, but then you have the mother and father, and they don't really seem to work into that equation. So it's not a one-to-one allegory. But there are, okay, so many scenes where it just feels hard to believe that it wasn't the original intention to have that be part of the subtext for this film, because it just happens too many times. And okay, at this point I'll be talking about spoilers somewhat. I'm not going to go too in depth, but if you're allergic to spoilers, you should probably I don't know, you can head out now because this is the last thing I'm going to be talking about. Which as I said, I do this, okay, really quickly before I drive anybody off with spoilers. I'll just say I do this show every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday at 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. You can support the channel by following me, or you can also follow me on Twitter at jskywatcher. And with that, let's move on to talking about getting more into specific about spoilers when it comes to Luca. So maybe I should make a more in-depth video on this. There's a great creator I like on YouTube. What's her name? Who did a great breakdown into why this film has gay subtext and why it's not just in your imagination. And okay, so first of all, you have the fact that sea monsters are feared in this town. Or not that, first of all. Okay, so there's just so many different things in this movie, that so many scenes that, like, if you took the word sea monster out and placed it with gay, it just makes too much sense. You have the fact that Luca, the main plot of the film is about Luca meeting Alberto and their friendship. A lot of people who I feel like any gay subtext just goes over their head will talk about this film like it's a trio, like it's about the trio of characters, but it's not. It really isn't. The movie is about Luca meeting Alberto and their friendship, because it's their friendship that is the turning point in the movie, when Alberto reveals he's a sea monster and Luca rejects him. It's their friendship that is at the climax of the film, where Alberto tries to help Luca and reveals himself to the whole town accidentally, and then Luca, and in order to save him, has to reveal himself as a sea monster. That's the core of the film. It's their friendship. You could easily rewrite this film without the character of now I gotta look it up. What is it? Julia. Not to say I don't like the character of Julia. I'm just saying it would be very hard to rewrite the film and take her character out. Whereas if you rewrote the film, I mean, you could argue, of course. I'm going to say, like, you could argue that you could rewrite anything, right? But if you rewrote the film and took either Luca or Roberto out or changed their relationship, it would change what the movie is. It wouldn't be Luca anymore. But you could write Luca and still have it be about Luca without the character of Julia. Because the movie is not about her. It's about Luca and Alberto. And then, obviously, at the end of the film, you have the two old women come out as sea monsters. They come out. And the other second thing is, yes, it's not a one-to-one allegory, because then you have the parents. It's like, well, then are the parents an allegory for being gay? No. Not because they're sea monsters. But you'll notice in the film, very little attention is paid to about them hiding themselves being sea monsters in the town, because in terms of like the subtext, it doesn't really matter. It's about the boys. And then you have the line of the villain at the end when he is basically attacking them, You know, he calls them, tells them people are afraid of them, that they find them disgusting. Which, I just, it's just a word of the I'm pretty sure, I'd have to watch it again. I'm pretty sure he says disgusting, which doesn't necessarily line up with the whole sea monster thing, but if you took this as subtext, makes a little bit more sense. I don't know. I feel like I need to do like a full deeper dive into this, like rewatch the film. I just think it's something that if you're not LGBT, I feel like it's easy to overlook. But it's just so present in the film if you're paying attention to it. And I think when one way to describe it is like the characters aren't gay. Like Luca and Alberto, as presented in the film, ignoring like subtext and everything, aren't gay, but they are not gay either. You know, I would say the film doesn't canonically portray Luca as straight either, which it could easily have done with the character of Julia, but they don't really go there. And then, of course, I forgot to mention, Alberto is jealous of Julia. Because, you know, subtext. Yeah, I know that there would be some people who would say, how dare you even, you know, think of the characters of being that way, because whenever you talk about younger characters being gay, that's somehow sexualizing them, whereas like if little boys are interested in little girls, you see that all the time, and that's fine. So that's my opinion on that argument, and I think it's stupid. What else? Just talking about other things I enjoyed about the film. I liked all the characters. I liked the cat. The Julia's father was another great character, and just the world in general was really great. I do think you could easily have this movie could easily have been written with the characters being canonically gay. To be honest. It maybe would have been a little bit better of a film, but Disney is not going to do that anytime soon. But even without that, it's a charming little movie, and it's a definitely a recommend for me. I would say if you haven't watched it yet. If obviously if you have Disney Plus, go ahead and watch it. You know, you're not paying extra for it. It's not Premier Access. So, definitely a recommend from me. And the only other thing I have to say is I will reiterate that I find it disappointing I couldn't see this in theaters, because I feel like it would have been even better in theaters. Okay, and I think that's going to be it for today. Actually, let me do it correctly. I never do this correctly, or the way I want it. Okay. So I think that's going to be it for me today. Thank you so much for watching. If you haven't already followed the channel, go ahead and click that follow button, and you can also follow me at JSkywatcher. And if you want to catch me live on Twitch, you can. I go live Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays at 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And I like talking about movie news and TV, gaming, and all that. If you have a topic you think I might be interested in talking about, feel free to message it to me on Twitter. Or you can reply. A lot of times on Twitter, I'll post a link to the video afterwards. So you can always reply there. Or, you know, just direct message me. Anyway, I hope you've enjoyed watching this. Or if you haven't, I don't know why you spent all the time watching it. I don't really care. Feel free to hate watch. And I will see you on, what today is Monday, so I will see you on Wednesday at 9 p.m. Thanks for watching. Bye.